So yeah, here we are. We're streaming on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And this is an interactive thing. That's why we do it live. So if you have any questions or comments that come up, do reply to this very tweet with the video embed, or use the hashtag MathsChatLive on Twitter. And we'll do our very best to put the question on to the panel and address it live for you. Just kind of like responsive teaching in some ways. So we'll just do a very quick round of introductions and get straight into it. So my name's Aturana. I'm an online maths tutor, and I teach pupils, homeschoolers, adults, etc., etc. Pretty much through the whole school level learning age range. So over to you, Matt.
Yeah, hi, I'm Matt's Mann, or Matthew Mann in full. So I've been teaching for, almost 9 years now. So I work in now is known as a high school, so not a secondary school, in the leafy town of Bromsgrove. So I've been teaching for 2 years, and I'm working with the likes of Mel and Chris from the Just Maths team. So I'll do a bit of A-level teaching GCSE.
Excellent. Rhi?
Hi, Rhiannon Rainbow, or I'm Nonny_Rainbow on Twitter, I think. I have been teaching, you said nearly 9 years. For me, it's more around 20 years now. And I'm a school improvement lead for the Greenshaw Learning Trust, but others might also know me on here for my work for the GLT Book Club that I co-founded with my wonderful colleague Dave Tushingham as well. So yeah, hi, nice to meet you all.
Excellent. And your first time here, Sammy?
Yeah, it is. Thanks for having me. My name's Sammy. I'm What the Trig Math on Twitter. I'm somewhere in the middle of 9 and 20 years, we won't say. I trained in secondary, which I'll now say high school then that. And then I went into alternative provisions, and then I went into further education, which is where I've stayed. I have come live from my further education resit class this evening, and I just teach one class a week now. But my main job is I'm the teaching and learning specialist for maths at TextHelp.
Excellent. Finally, over to you, Mark.
Yeah, I'm Mark McCourt. Wear various hats, one of them being running Complete Maths. So I think that'll do for biog for me, because we've talked lots of times on this channel before.
Certainly have, and I'll plug the MathsConf straight away. And there's.
I'm going to plug it lots. So
yeah, we'll be hopefully meeting. I think all of us will be there at the MathsConf in Gloucester, the 12th of March. Yeah. Okay, and so yeah, if you're on Twitter, do please retweet so you're watching, so that other people can tune in, and it comes up on their feed. So the more people share, the more reach we have. So yeah, we've been on Maths Chat Live many times, Mark, and we've talked about quite a few things, mastery, but I see from your latest blog posts you have a sort of a new way looking at it with the Limitless series of posts, and you're doing going around the country talking about mastery from that new perspective. So there's a lot in those blog posts. I'm just going to pick a little bit from it, and we're going to look at the bit that's kind of interesting me is the fact where you talk about automaticity, that becomes almost a superficial goal that you see. So if you could just explain that, I suppose, automaticity in the perspective of like the stages of learning and why that's a sort of not a great goal to aim for.
Yeah, it's well, as you know, lots of things come and go in fads and fashions, and in maths education at the moment, automaticity has become a thing to aim for. Lots of people are talking about it. That if you can work with a certain piece of mathematics, you can work with a mathematical idea more or less in an automatic way without a lot of mental energy, then that's a good thing. And that's what we should be aiming for. And you see lots of schools talking about trying to get pupils to automaticity with their mathematical ideas, and then they can progress. And it kind of, the reason I worry about that rhetoric, which has really gripped the UK at the moment, schools are looking at that as a goal, The reason I worry about that rhetoric is that once you get to that point where you're working with anything at all, it can be a maths book, whatever. Once you get to that point where you have pretty much a command of the skill that you're working with, and you can do it automatically without doing a lot of thought, you're in your comfort zone. And that's where most people get to with most things that they're learning in life, right? Nearly all of us do that. You might be learning to play tennis, you might be learning to dance, you might be learning to sculpt, you might be learning how to speak French. And we get to a point where we think that's good enough, right? I can speak enough French to get me through day to day, and I can cope traveling around, or I can play tennis to a standard where I can have fun with my friends and everybody enjoys it and I don't feel like an idiot, and that's good enough. So nearly everybody aims for getting to this good enough area in most of the disciplines. The trouble is when you get to that point, you kind of plateau, right? So because you're completely in your comfort zone. And we know that learning doesn't happen in your comfort zone. Learning happens at the very boundaries of your comfort zone. If you're not having to attend, if you're not having to put in efforts, if you're not having to really focus and stretch yourself, if you're not having to identify areas where some small aspect of it is holding you back, and you target it and improve it, learning just ceases. So I think automaticity is a really poor goal for education, because at the outset, what you're saying is, our goal is to get you to a point where you stop learning. And I don't think that's a very good goal for schools or colleges to try to pursue. So what I'm arguing here is that automaticity is a necessary and useful step in learning, but it should not be the aim of learning. There are many, many, many steps that come after that. Once you get to being pretty fluid with something, you can work with it. The playing the tennis thing, you can serve. You've learned how to serve, and you can do it without a lot of thinking, a lot of effort. But anyone who plays tennis still misses a lot of serves, right? So you serve, and maybe 1 in 10 times you foul. Okay. And maybe 1 in 10 is okay, particularly if the guy you're playing against is worse than you, right? Then 1 in 10 is probably all right. But what if you said to yourself, actually, I noticed that 1 in 10 times I don't get that thing right. I'm going to set myself a target of lowering that failure rate down to 1 in 20. And then you do that through a lot of really, really focused practice. And then you say, well, that worked. I set myself a target. I could get better at that thing. The thing I thought I was good enough at, I'm now better at. Well, I'm going to set myself another target and go further and further and further. And you can do that in all disciplines. So when you get to a point where it doesn't take you a great deal of mental energy to perform in mathematics, that's an exciting moment, because instead of stopping at that point, you can now, through very purposeful and deliberate practice, improve. And I think that's where we should be trying to get all pupils to. One of the things I talk about in the Limitless posts is this notion of elite performance. Because I want to break down the idea that there are elite people and non-elite people. And I think that every person can attain elite performance in every domain. We know this, right? This has been looked at so many times over such a long period of time. And it's by recognizing that everyone can, through well-rehearsed practices, improve their performance. It's by recognizing that we don't give up on any kid, and we say, come on, you can get further. Let's identify the thing, let's improve it, and let's get better and better and better. And a lot of people think, well, maybe good enough is good enough. Maybe it's all right that the pupil gets, when they're solving an equation and doing a linear equation, they get 1 in every 10 wrong. Maybe that's okay. They still know how to solve an equation, right? They just make a slip up every 1 in 10. Maybe that's okay. And maybe it is solving a linear equation. Maybe it is okay. I don't think it is, but maybe. But what if it's something like, I don't know, a group of place value, accuracy when adding, accuracy when multiplying? What if it's something like that? Is getting 1 in 10 wrong okay then? Well, think how many things sit on top. If you took multiplying, think how many things in mathematics sit on top of that If at this base layer, you've got a 10% inaccuracy rate, then this whole thing just crumbles. So my argument is we can make sure as we progress through mathematics that we get every child to elite performance. And I mean developmentally appropriate eliteness, right? So there is elite performance for a 5-year-old. There's elite performance for a 10-year-old. I'm not saying that a 5-year-old is winning the Fields Medal, right? I'm saying they are performing with a great deal of accuracy on the mathematics that they're learning at that stage. So that's why I think automaticity is a poor aim, because there's so much more that comes after it. And if you stop at automaticity, you're saying it's okay to accept that the pupils are just good enough with a high failure rate. And that isn't okay in a hierarchical subject like mathematics, where learning of new concepts depends on your understanding of previous concepts. It's not okay that those concepts are weak. So yeah, that's the basic gist of that argument. Hopefully that makes sense, but I don't know what you guys think. Did that rambling explanation make any sense to anyone?
It's interesting what you said, because I guess the thing is just try not to confuse automaticity with mastery, isn't it? Because I know from when we talk about teaching with mastery, we talk about some people talk about the magic goal of 80%. But if we talk about 90% being not good enough in tennis, 90% serve, we'll probably lose. If you're an elite tennis player, you'll lose you a lot of first round matches. You're not going to make it. You're thinking about the likes of, Novak or Rafa Nadal. They'll go for 95% or way above 95% first serves to get to where they need to be. So I'm thinking of when we talk about automaticity, I'm sure we don't want to confuse it with mastery when we talk about 80% of a particular topic, when we talk about how you sort of master that. And I'm thinking about, so if we're talking about elitism being potentially 90% or way above 90%, how does that compare to mastery when we talk about it being 80%?
Yeah, elite performance is way, way, way above 90%, Matt. Way, 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 way.
Yeah.
And that has a really big implication on the amount of practice that pupils do at different times in their learning. So there are two camps in education that argue quite a lot. There's a camp that says when you're teaching some pupils, you should work on a small number of examples. It's better to do 3 examples really well than it is to do 100 examples.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that camp. And there's another camp that says, no, practice makes perfect. Okay, the reason the army drill their soldiers in how to put a machine gun together is because you have to get it right all the time, always. So practice makes perfect. And these two camps pretend that there's a debate, and there isn't a debate. What we're talking about there really is there are different points in when you're learning. So when you're learning about a new idea, when you're bringing about awareness of an idea, when you're trying to understand it conceptually, when you're trying to understand the why of the idea, the underlying principles, the boundary conditions, then it is better to work on a small number of examples and really get under the skin of them, really think about it carefully, really unpick every step, every bit of meaning that's going on there, every bit of didactics that's happening in that piece of mathematics. But once you've done that and you understand the idea and you get to a point where, let's say it is solving a linear equation, right? Easy thing to teach kids. I want to solve a linear equation. And I talk to them about why all of these things work, what's going on here with the arithmetic, what's going on here with the isomorphic functions on both sides and what I can do and so on, right? And I'm talking to them about all that, and they start to understand, they grip it, and we work on a few and we go through it step by step by step. And then they're kind of off on their own and they can do it. So then how many examples do you give them? Is 10 enough? Is 30 enough? Is 100 enough? Well, no, none of those are enough. None of them. Not if you want to get to a point of absolutely having this such that you will get this correct in the future. And why might it matter that you get that correct solving a linear equation? Well, you're going to be pretty useless at trig when that comes up, aren't you? If simply balancing an equation is going to trip you up every now and then, it's going to cause a real impediment. So it's about making sure that impediment isn't there. So it has this big implication about how much practice is appropriate to get to this high level of performance. What mastery is about is this cyclical model where you're incrementally always building and building and building and learning more and more and more and more. And you mature with your mathematics, and you can see previous mathematics from a new perspective with new light. That 80% threshold that's being discussed in mastery is about that, what I'd call short-term knowledge acquisition phase. So it's about that phase where people like Rohrer and Taylor, for example, say, hey, look, there's probably no difference between doing 10 questions and doing 30 questions. That is true at that phase, because at that phase, we're bringing about awareness, we're bringing about an appropriate level of accuracy, so not elite performance. We're bringing about an understanding, we're bringing about knowledge of the boundaries and the principles. So at that stage, can the mastery cycle move on? Yes, it can.
Yeah.
Do we get an appropriate level of understanding and of accuracy, and we can move on? But the mastery cycle is like it's not really a cycle, right? It's more of a spiral.
Yeah.
And as that is growing and growing and growing, how many times do you at school solve a linear equation? It's a lot more than 5. It's a lot more than 10. It's a lot more than 50. It's probably several thousand, right?
Yeah.
And it is these several thousands of occasions that give you the opportunity to practice properly and get to elite performance. So they're two very different things. The 80% threshold is about when can we move on to new meaning? When can the spiral progress into discussing new areas of mathematics? How much understanding and underpinning is there to allow us to have a new conversation? Whereas when I talk about going beyond automaticity and going into elite performance, which we do through naive practice, purposeful practice, and deliberate practice, when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about something quite different. I'm talking about the fact that every single pupil most certainly has the potential for elite performance in every domain. And by appreciating that as a teacher, they have the potential for elite performance, then maybe that's what we'll aim for. And isn't that a better aim than good enough? So they're two separate things. The mastery cycle is much more about the understanding, conceptually gripping, understanding principles, underlying features, and then elite performance is, what if we took it further? What if we went further with that? And what's really interesting about human beings is everyone has a domain where they can persevere. And see, the thing about elite performance is it takes absolute grit, absolute perseverance. It's really uncomfortable achieving elite performance in any domain. In mathematics, in tennis, when Novak's playing, he's not going to want to get more than 1 in 1,000 serves out, right? That is painful. When you ask a chess grandmaster, hey, do you enjoy completely sacrificing your social life to practice and memorize moves and memorize every position that can ever happen? And they all say, no, I hate it. I hate that practice. Why do you do it? Atul and I have talked about this before, about playing guitar, right? There are moves that you make on the guitar that literally hurt your hand, like cause you physical pain. But still we persevere until we get there. What is it that causes that? Now, every child has one domain at least, but probably multiple. Every child has at least one domain where they will persevere through pain, boredom, tedium, frustration, failure. And I think schooling is about finding that domain for every child. Because if you're studying 15 subjects and one of them you are elite in, you have elite performance, then everything else is tolerable, right? So, if you're an elite historian, if you're an elite artist, you're an elite sports person, you are at an institution where everyone around you, or your peer group, celebrates you for something. And I think that's important. I think it's important that every child leaves school having been the one who was celebrated for something. So what happens quite a lot, Atul, with that, when I talk about this sort of limitless potential thing, is people say, you can't be elite performance in every single subject. I'm not saying you can. I'm saying everyone has the potential to be, but you'll have a proclivity towards some area that you will persevere through. And schools have got to find that area and unlock it and allow you to be that. And maybe if schools said, you know what, there's 15 subjects, it's all right to be articulate in all of them, but you're the best at one of them. You know, how much taller do you walk home then? How much better do you feel about your life as a child? And then that has an impact across everything that you're learning about. So I think it's quite a good belief for teachers to have. And you know, it's not just a belief. This stuff. Atul said that this is a new thing that I'm writing about, but like everything I do, Atul, it's actually ancient, right? It's there's nothing new about this. This has been studied for decades and decades, and repeatedly shown to be the case, that we all have that potential.
I think, oh, sorry, Mark. I think that's really true for further education as well. Like, we find the subject that they're really interested in because that's what they come join us to study. We then hammer them over the head and go, oh, you've got to do English and maths multiple times until you pass it. And, you know, we then lose a bit of it. But there's certainly a connection once they find their fit and they find their course. I just had a film studies student announce that he's going to university and he's so excited. And now he is on his maths because it's tolerable to him now because he knows what his end game is. He can see that. And so I think that's certainly true for us in FE. Yeah,
definitely. And think of, you know, if I think of the number of 17, 18, 19-year-olds I've met who have come into FE, they're on a 1 or below, right, in maths, which means they really haven't learnt any maths since year 1 at school. They've had 11 years at school being told you're a failure. And they come and they sign up to automotive engineering or bricklaying or whatever it is. The number of 17, 18, 19-year-olds I've met who will tell me, this is the first time ever that I've felt successful. You know, I'm in my bricklaying class and I can do it. Look at this. Look at how good I am at doing this. Imagine if in year 1 we'd found the thing they were great at and had a proclivity towards, then the rest of their 11 years, yes, there would be other subjects where they think, no, I'm not that interested in that. But isn't school great? Isn't the thing of coming to school great? Because there is a thing that, you know, my mate's the best at that, that mate's the best at that, that mate's the best at that, and I am the best at this. And that's great. That's, you know, when we talk about kind of diversity of thought, we all hold these different potentials and these different skills within us. And if you are celebrated through your time at school, it lifts everything. You know, and it just makes you more competent in everything. So.
Yeah, I have a Key Stage 1 child, so I am living this at the moment because my Key Stage 1 child thinks that they are not amazing at most of what they're studying, and we're trying to find that thing to help them and motivate them. But interestingly, the breadth of the curriculum means that it's like, oh, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and they're not given enough time, I don't think, to master what it is that they really want to be passionate about. And because the curriculum just carries them through all the, naturally, they're all right at maths. So we kind of think maths might be their thing. We're kind of hoping that maths might be their thing. But the confidence as a parent in seeing your child go to school and then have it wiped out of them in EYFS, and only now at the end of Key Stage 1 is it slowly coming back in. It's really heartbreaking as a parent because they've gone this confident, capable child and we've just not found that fit. That's the thing. And I think you're absolutely right. And it's something I'm going to, you know, really push with my child now. And like, yeah, I'm not wrong. I was right all along. But yeah, it's finding that thing, but they're so young.
It's an extraordinarily unusual experience for a child. You know, 0 to 3, they're at home, they're with some of the peer group. They don't even have a concept that maybe they're a failure, right? And then they turn up to school and suddenly there's a bunch of things that tell me you can't do these things. Whereas before they got there, they'll think, oh, there's some stuff I can't do, but it doesn't really matter because there's loads of other stuff I can do. And it all sort of balances out. And I think there are 2 things at play there, 2 major things. The curriculum in this conveyor belt approach, in the restricted view of what learning is itself a hindrance. But then also there has become, in recent years, a loss of the belief amongst the teaching profession that every pupil has potential. Now, if we could bring that back, this is just true. Every pupil does have potential. There is no evidence whatsoever that human cognitive architecture has changed in the last 50,000 years, right? So Isaac Newton, you've got his brain, right? So you've got exactly the same, precisely the same physiological attributes, right? So you have precisely the same potential there, and so does every single child. And if we could bring back the understanding amongst teachers that, look, it doesn't matter where they're from, what their background is, how they dress, how they speak, they all have limitless potential. Find it and unlock it. If we brought that back as a focus to all teachers, then maybe people's experience of school might be more positive than it is currently. So,
you came up with that phrase of standing on the shoulder of giants, which brings us to the other point where you come to this stage, because there's lots of different ideas in mathematics and natural philosophy and science going on at the time. So he didn't discover calculus in a vacuum. There was a whole bunch of stuff that happened to be at that time be in place. So all he's done is bring together all of these different ideas and then kind of link them all up and come up with this calculus thing. And we do that all the time. I basically took Mass Chat Live, was basically a bit of teaching, a bit of music, a bit of this and a bit of internet geekery and stuff. I join them all up, but it's only possible because all of these things already pre-existed.
That's that idea that I write about, this cumulative culture idea. We are not individually as human beings. We're not really much different in terms of our own individual intellect. Not really much different to our ape cousins, right? If I dropped any of you in the middle of a jungle, and you had nothing with you, your ability to invent a new machine is about as good as theirs. And the reason that human beings are different is because we have this idea of cumulative culture. So rather than us all having to start from day one when we're born to learn everything, we don't do that, do we? We hand down the whole of humanity's knowledge to each generation, and then they iterate it, and then they hand down the iterated version of all of humanity's knowledge to the next generation. So you're always building from this point, building upwards. So when Leibniz is bringing together the calculus, he's not able to do that on his own. If he had to do that on his own, he'd have to be alive for millions of years to have those thoughts, to have enough time to think about the whole thing from scratch. If you look at your smartphone in your hand, do you have any idea what it is or how it works or how to build one? Of course not. But humanity together does. So we're very, very, very powerful together as human beings. We're very powerful when we combine our culture, combine our knowledge. But individually, we're just apes, right? We don't have a more powerful brain than before the cognitive revolution, right? 70,000 years ago. It's the same biology. What we've done is we've built and built and built and built. And that in part is why I sometimes worry about this idea of saying to pupils, hey, go and discover maths. It's like, really? Because we've just spent 70,000 years finding all that out. Really? You want them to just do that on their own, do you? You want them to do the 70,000 years of millions of human beings thinking, do you? Or maybe you could give them a leg up and introduce them to mathematics, teach them mathematics. Because of course what you're trying to do is to give them that head start with where we are currently at with the whole of humanity's knowledge, such that they might play a part. They might be the person that takes one of Newton's ideas and iterates it further and finds out something new. But they can't do that if they're starting from day one. So yeah, I think that cumulative culture is such an important part of learning, and we too often forget about it. It's not enough just to let pupils loose to find everything out on their own. That's a neglectful, abusive thing to do. It's also not enough just to tell them everything in maths. That's also neglectful because it leaves them incapacitated. We need to tell them what we know about mathematics, but we also need to tell them how those thoughts came about and what are the processes for making thoughts come about. so that those pupils can go into adult life and they themselves can take the journey further, and they themselves can advance a discipline, whether it's mathematics or whichever discipline it is. So yeah, so that's a really important idea, cumulative culture.
So,
and it's really important. Oh, sorry,
go
Atul.
for it. Yeah, go for it.
It's really important too that sort of circling back to something you mentioned earlier about just if we find something that a student, where anybody is able to be successful in something and see this hard work helps me to get better at this, then they can appreciate, actually, if I invest in something here, I get better, I feel good about myself, and then they're more likely to transfer that to other things that they do as well, because they know that the hard work, the effort they put in, the things that they need to overcome, they will reap the rewards at the end of it. But if we tell them everything, we're not going to help them to have that really important struggle with it and the respect for themselves that when they get better at something. And I think, that idea that learning is amazing, and let's have it so that they become absolutely brilliant at one aspect, and then they can transfer it to so many things. And then that brings into it, doesn't it, your idea of that cumulative culture, that we're able to help them to be not experts, elite at one area, and then everybody will benefit from their elitism or them being elite in that area, and then somebody else can be elite in another area, and we all benefit at the end, rather than trying to get everybody to a certain level at everything all of the time. And it just gets really, really muddy, because you can't appreciate what it is you're able to do yourself and then really use that for other aspects too. That's just what I've been thinking at the moment, while you've been talking, because when you, Sammy, were saying about how looking at your Key Stage 1 child, and when they're at school and suddenly they're told, you can't do this bit. No, I can't do that bit yet. Right? Yet. But I will be able to do at some point. Doesn't matter that I can't do it now, because I'll be able to do it at some point. But right now, I can do this really cool thing here instead. And it's such a hard balance to have.
That's an interesting debate, Rhiannon. The way in which lots of countries in the world have gone around general education. So let's get everyone to be generalists in everything, which is the whole design of GCSE, right? So you're a generalist at everything. And the idea behind that is because you're young and you don't yet know where you're going in life, and let's make sure everyone has this level that gives them the chance to make choices later on in life. So there's a very interesting reason for that. But when you zoom out and you think, well, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and humanity has some extraordinarily challenging questions to address in the next however many years, next 100 years, next 1,000 years. Humanity is going to be faced with extraordinary challenges. It should be incumbent upon us to make sure that we find in every single human being their absolute best, because we need it. We need, out of every 7 billion, we need everybody's absolute best from everyone. And they're not the same. No one's the same at all. So getting the absolute best out of everyone, when do we start that process? Education is set up to create a kind of grayness where everyone is the same. And that might not be the best head start for finding everyone's absolute best. But that's a hugely controversial debate, is what do you do and when do you do it? At what age do you do it? Is it, some people say it's 16, some people say 18. Is it 14? Is it 11? When is it that you can start to diverge and you can start to identify what it is you're amazing at? Like Matt mentioned some tennis stars earlier. Well, Novak was on the court at age 3, right? And someone identified that and then took that further. It's very hard to have a schooling system that does that. It's very hard to have a schooling system that recognizes that people are different, and maybe finding their differences is as powerful as making them all the same.
I was just going to say that. I was just going to say, I think it's more then that education should allow and encourage and accept a change of path, because it's okay to try something, decide it's not yours, and then try something else. But we have a very linear process. You choose your options, you do your GCSEs, you do your A-levels, and if you want to change, well, people, you want to change your A-levels partway through? Are you sure? Is that, what are you doing? You're going to waste a year, and how are you going to, and we've got a system where it's, you've chosen a path and we're going to go on it, and actually we need to shift that focus to be more, so you're going to change, great, amazing. What did you learn there that you want to take forward into this, and what do you want to not take with you, and what do you want to go forward into this with? And that's a whole different narrative, but sort of still within the confines of what we've got in this generalism approach.
Yeah, it's a very strange time in history where we're at the moment with education, that schools on the whole don't have a purpose. Schools on the whole don't know why they exist, what they exist for, what it is they're trying to do. It's an odd time in history that we've come to. That's not been the case historically. Schools have generally had a purpose, and some of them were the same as each other, and some of them were very different to each other, but they had a purpose. And we're in this weird time now where, what are they for? It might be a little bit of a big question for Maths Chat Live at all, to ask what are schools for, but it's a pretty important question, because it defines everything else and determines how everything else comes together and works. But anyway, we'll park that for a bigger philosophical debate, I think.
See what Twitter comes back with. If you're out there on Twitter, post your thoughts.
I will also mention here, if it's okay, I thought it's quite interesting where we talk about, anybody being able to get better at anything. But I've also heard, Mark, you were saying about how the mindset of some people are changing and putting sort of limits on what they think students are capable of. But I also hear people talking of their colleagues in the same way as well, or training others and saying, some people just can teach and others just can't, and there's not a lot you can do to be able to help them. And I just think that maybe that's indicative of other things, that other mindsets that we're thinking of at the moment as well. And it is something that I know the maths community that you've helped to found and that we're working with, and where we're learning from each other, and we've got people who are early in their careers. If we look at the presentations that Nathan Day has done previously, and with the names we know, and then other people who've been around for longer, like yourself, who are presenting in the same place, and we're all learning from each other, and everybody is respectful of one another and listening to each other and values what we all say at the same place at the same time. And I went to my first maths comp event in person last year, and I was just amazed that, oh my goodness, I'm seeing all these incredible people in person, and most of the time, and all of the time, they're just saying to me, look, we're just a person, we're here all together at the same time to learn from each other. And I think that it helps to even out that skew, that distortion that sometimes we find. So yeah, I just thought it might be worth bringing it around to that, because we got quite an exciting event coming up soon.
Yeah, and it is the reason why we created MathsConf. Was I'm sure you've heard me say in the past that 350,000 people teach maths in England. Imagine if we all knew each other. Wouldn't that be extraordinarily powerful? If we just knew each other, and we weren't afraid of each other, and we don't freak each other out, and we all accept, look, there are times where you'll have shocking days and there are times where you have great days, and we can have a pint together and we can dance until 4 a.m. together or whatever it is. Imagine how powerful that would be. And I still hold that hunch. I still think that's a hypothesis that is worth pursuing. The more and more of us who know each other, properly know each other, have spent social time and professional time together, then that brings about enormous gains. There's one of the things about teaching is it can be extraordinarily isolating. You're in your classroom on your own, teaching. You're surrounded by people, little people, right? But that's not the same as being able to have professional conversations about what you do and what it is you want to improve about yourself. And teaching's a strange one. We're in the business of learning, yet we very, very often forget that we're meant to be learning about this too. We're meant to be learning more and more and more about what it is to be a teacher and what effective teaching looks like. So, I think that holds true, that MathsConf idea. And, next, a week on Saturday, on the 12th, when we all come together again, there'll be that feeling again, won't there? And people will just help each other out. It's such a friendly group of people. What I tried to do with MathsConf was to have there's no party line to toe, right? So everyone's welcome. Anyone can say anything. It's in an environment where everyone knows everything's up for debate, everything's up for discussion, and no one feels threatened. No one feels worried about, well, you might feel worried about walking on stage in front of a lot of people, but that quickly goes when you see lots of friendly faces. So I totally agree. And I'm very pleased we set it up, and I'm very pleased that whatever it is, 5 times a year, hundreds of us come together and have got to know each other over the year. And that's opened up other avenues, like, Atol's private tutor opened up that avenue as well, that those people get involved so that everyone feels, look, if you're playing a part in helping a child become more mathematical, then you're part of this group, you're part of this community. So I think that's a really important thing to remember as well. It's not just for classroom teachers, it's for anyone involved in teaching mathematics. So yeah, absolutely. How's everyone else feel about MathsConf and what's coming up in a week and a bit time?
I'm definitely excited. It's almost like, I think for me, I think it'll be the second presentation I've now done in person. This one, I still remember the first one. That was I think I took a leaf out of your book talking about mastery. That was the first one. And obviously last year I did the virtual one with Sheena about just talking about A-level maths in the pandemic. And then this year, so this one I'm doing on next Saturday is about just preparing year 11s for A-level maths. So not just specifically about year 11s, but actually how do you, it's almost, I think my workshop might actually kind of go hand in hand with Sam and Rob's workshop because they're doing one in a sort of a similar vein. I think they're probably more focused towards sort of lower down and how to teach higher up to A-level. Whereas like for the one I'm doing, it's more, let's just actually compare the questions from GCSE papers, so A-level papers, and see, well, actually, can you even identify which is an A-level question, which is a GCSE question? If I take off the question numbers, take off whatever, do we know what they are? Do we know if they're GCSE or A-level? I think it'd be quite an interesting debate and interesting discussion, I think.
That sounds good. And is that something you've tried in the classroom where you show pupils A-level questions that are in GCSE?
Yeah, they love it because it's sort of like, oh, this looks familiar. I'm like, yeah. And then when I told them it's an A-level question, I'm like, really? That's an A-level question? I can do that in year 10 or year 11. Like,
I've done those with primary kids where you show them questions from a GCSE foundation paper and they can do it and then get everything right. And then you reveal GCSE and they get very excited.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting thing to do. What about you guys? What workshops are you doing next week? Rhiannon, what are you up to next week?
I am Excited, very excited, in lots of different ways. So I'm going to be doing a talk with Dave Tushingham on our book club, as you do. But it's changing with the things we'll be discussing and what we'll be doing. And we're hoping to announce something quite exciting too. So I won't share it here because that's not fair on Dave. We'll do it in our session next week. And yeah, that is taking up a lot of my thinking at the moment. But what am I excited for? I still can't quite believe it, actually, that Maths Comp is going to be at one of my schools. So it is just one of those things that I think I will remember for such a very, very, very long time, because it's an immense privilege to be able to help support and be a part of this. So I'm just working with different people and different things to try and make sure that we're able to facilitate you guys and everything that's going on at the same time. And I haven't booked my workshops yet because I'm not very good at making decisions. And I'm only good when I have to do it. So I'm the last person around a table when you're booking, when you're ordering your meals and you go out for a dinner, because that means I have to actually do it then. And there's some incredible things happening and people talking and opportunities. And I want to be in so many of the different rooms. And I also I just want to stand in what we call the heart space for part of the day and just stand in the middle and watch and listen and feel that buzz and that atmosphere around you, because it's something that's been really hard to be able to experience in the same way for the last couple of years. And I know that it's going to re-energize me, and it's going to boost me, and it's going to help me to feel part of something bigger and this amazing community, rather than at the moment it can, even though we're back in schools and we're back doing things, it still feels quite isolating, and I'm used to being in my own head more rather than working and collaborating with colleagues. So what I'm most excited about is just that atmosphere and that energy and that being around other people in 3D. That is just going to be immense. So I haven't booked my workshops because for me, that's that extra that is going to be added to the day. I'm sorry, I went off on one then, but that is what I really cannot wait for, is just to see Atul in person again, to meet you and again, Matt, and just to also say, look, I can stand next to Mark McCourt again and hold a conversation in person, and Sammy will be there too, and all these incredible people that we meet on here and we talk to and appreciate one another as people and human beings, and the extra that we get from that. So yeah, and of course the maths we get from it too.
I think that's it, isn't it? I think I'm very new to Maths Comp, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't think there were 4 FE, but I did some work with on Tutor, and I was very much welcomed and very much supported, and made a really good friend as well. In Stuart, and I think that gave me the confidence to pitch for a virtual maths conference. And I did my GIF workshop, which is about modelling using a GIF to sort of change the medium and things like that, and it touches on digital divide, but it also touches on like the power of modelling in maths, which is like one of the things that we seek all the time. So what I wanted to share was that would not have been possible had the community not been so supportive, because I would have just walked away and gone, no, you don't want to hear from me, you don't want to hear what I do in my classroom, why do you want to know about that? That's just me. But like you say, it's that isolating experience, and it's about bringing yourself out of that. So yes, I'm not sharing at this one. I'm purely coming to experience it in real life, in the flesh, and prepared for how overwhelming that's all going to be.
Well, I'm sure it'll be different to the online one, because we have food and drink and booze the night before. That always gives it a slightly different edge. FE is really big deal to us at Complete Maths. Like, we love FE, and we have lots and lots of FE partners. So yeah, any FE people that are listening, come along. You'll find lots of other people there who are FE, and there's always people talking about that sector. It's such an important sector. Right? The number of people who are teaching mathematics. I know the number of colleges isn't big. It's like 300 odd, but the number of people who are teaching mathematics, and they're teaching mathematics to hundreds of thousands of students. It's a really, really important sector, including adults as well that are being taught. So we definitely want FE colleagues there, and everyone's very welcome to be there. Are you doing anything next week at all?
I'm not presenting.
Slacker.
Like I'm much better online with my virtual manipulatives and things flashing about the multi-base arithmetic, the last one.
Have you done a live one yet? I know you've done on the online MathsConf, but have you presented at a face-to-face one?
I haven't done a face-to-face. I reckon
I'm going to make you do one this year.
I'm saying that for what, 4 years, I think.
Yeah. Force the issue this year.
I'll have to do a practice run because I don't do group teaching at all live. I've got a question based on one of the workshops next week. I'm quite looking forward to All Things Being Equal, the life and times of Robert Record. I suppose my question was this equal sign and what equality means and what equality between expressions means. I see this come up again and again with my tutees. They don't understand what the equal signs means and what inequality is, and when they come to do inequalities, the understanding of it completely breaks down. So if you could just talk around, which seems so simple, this equal sign, but there's a lot going in.
Pupils, they sit in loads and loads of classrooms. They're going to make logical leaps, aren't they, when they see things? And that symbol, those two horizontal lines, where do they see that? And what's being said when they see that? And what logical leap would you make based on that experience? Well, the logical leap you would make, as lots and lots of pupils do, is those two horizontal lines mean put the answer here. So for the vast majority of pupils, two horizontal lines just mean write the answer here. And that makes perfect sense when you watch early mathematics being taught. It looks as though that's what those two lines mean. And we don't really do much work at all on what that symbol means and what the difference between equality and equivalence is, and what makes something an equation, what makes something an identity, what makes something a formula, what makes something an expression, what makes something a term. We don't do a lot of work on these things. So it makes a lot of sense to me that pupils don't really grip what that means. And then, of course, you introduce a slightly different symbol, the inequality symbols. And they think, well, hang on a minute. The two lines mean put the answer here. So what do these lines mean? And they haven't had that proper discussion. I think one of the things that creates the most misconception about those two horizontal lines is that we teach lots and lots and lots of things in early mathematics with the equals symbol, and we don't teach the does not equals symbol. So you never show where that symbol breaks down. And it's such an easy thing to do. If you're solving an equation, show the bit where they are no longer equal and put the does not equal symbol into that. And that's a profound moment for pupils where they start thinking, oh, hang on a minute here. There's a thing that you can do, and then this thing here is no longer true. So what is this thing here? And then we can start talking about equivalence, and we can start talking about actually that's what you're trying to maintain. So when you're working with these two horizontal lines, you're trying to maintain this idea of equivalence. And that becomes really important later on when you're learning mathematics. And you need to unpick something big and complex. If you realize, actually, I can do, if I have some expressions on either side of this symbol, I can do anything to these, anything at all that I want to do to these things. And if I do something over here, this symbol becomes a does not equal symbol. And the only way to get the other symbol back is, well, I better perform an isomorphic function here. And they start to realize, oh, that's what this symbol means. This symbol means that if I apply an isomorphic function between these two things here, equivalence remains true. But we don't do a lot of work on that at all. And it's one of those things I was talking about earlier when I'm talking about how accurate and what level of accuracy matters. Like maybe you can get away with 1 in 100 times you get a multiplication wrong, fine. Can you get away with not understanding what equals means? Can you get away with not understanding what place value means? Can you get away with, right? And there's so many of these things, these fundamental ideas that really do need to be understood very clearly, and pupils really do need to have elite performance in working with those ideas. Else the rest of mathematics is extraordinarily difficult to build. So yeah, I obsess a little about things like equals and equality and equivalence, and the fact that we never bother teaching it. Such a big thing that's never ever taught. And the only thing pupils have got going for them is to make logical leaps based on what they're witnessing at the front of the room or in a book. And if you had to start afresh and you knew nothing about this at all, but you just witnessed a bunch of these things, you just witnessed the teacher doing this at the board, you would make that assumption too. You would make the assumption, whenever you want to say, put the answer somewhere, you write this thing here. That's what you do. So yeah, it'd be interesting. It's Gareth Evans, isn't it, doing Robert Record?
Yeah.
That'll be a really interesting thing to do. Lovely to see something like that on at MathsCon, where we're taking some didactics of mathematics and really getting, in depth with it. I think that'd be a really fascinating session. It's one of the ones I'm going to sneak into when Gareth's doing that. So, yeah, we'll see how that one goes. But that's the technical detail of mathematics. It's too often ignored, I think, and then we wonder why they're struggling with things later on. Because we didn't explain things in depth. How do you find that with pupils that you work with? What do they think those two horizontal lines mean?
They think most of the time it's exactly equal. Everything is the same on that side. Sometimes they give me the answer, because on the calculator the equal button is punch that button and it comes out. Yeah,
see, that's another action, right? Where, whenever I punch that, I get an answer. So again, it strengthens that idea that means write the answer here. Is the same as, oh God. Oh, how I hate that.
So does that come from then that we've accepted that they just need to be good enough to know that you put the correct answer here, and then we've moved on, like you said at the beginning?
Yeah, it's conveyor belt, isn't it? There's an objective in year one. You think, well, they're getting all the answers right. That's good enough. Let's carry on, without thinking, well, stuff the conveyor belt, stuff when this curriculum tells me to move on. This idea we're learning about today is profound. It has an impact on all other areas of mathematics. We better get under the skin of this and make sure this is properly gripped and properly understood by everyone before we build upon it. But that isn't what we have in England. We have this notion of, it's this today, it's this today, it's this today, and just move on and on and on and on. That is largely where that comes from. And there is also a training thing as well for teachers, that by the time you come into teaching, you have long since forgotten the need to even think about what that symbol means, because it's so embedded. You so fully appreciate its different uses and what it means in different contexts. And this happens a lot in teaching, that some things to you are so far out of your memory that you think, well, this is a simple thing, therefore I can treat it as a simple thing with pupils, forgetting that every single brand new idea that anyone meets is difficult. So that happens a lot as well, that we skip through things that we as teachers think, well, come on, this is a doddle, this thing here. And we forget, actually, whenever you have to think about anything brand new for the first time ever, it's hard. So there's that side of it as well. And then, the writing it as is the same as, that comes from pedagogic tricks to get through objectives. I'll just tell you it means that for now. Right, so this symbol means it's the same as, okay, is that all right? Yeah, okay, let's move on. And it's those little tricks that help you get through the conveyor belt curriculum. And you think, well, by the time this matters in a couple of years' time, when mathematics falls apart because they don't understand what this symbol means, well, they're not with me anymore. So, that's somewhere else. So we do suffer a little bit from that as well. And the language that teachers use, you will hear teachers use the language a lot when using that symbol. They'll say is the same as, and that isn't what that means, that symbol. So by small pedagogic choices, in other words, by not saying that sentence, we could have a big impact by just never saying that sentence when we're teaching that. In the same way, when you're teaching, subtraction, and then you have a smaller number and you're trying to subtract a larger number from it, it's quick and easy and gets you through a lesson to say that can't be done, right? So you can just say that, and then that's that dealt with, and there's no discussion. You can get on with the lesson. But it's better to say, yeah, that's a thing we can do. We're not doing it today, but it is a thing we can do. It can be addressed. And as we unpick mathematics, you'll see how. Now, that's not a big deal, is it? It's not a big deal to change your sentence into that kind of curiosity sentence rather than, no, it can't be done. And then pupils remember forever, well, you can't do those things, and take that as their assumption. Then you have to unpick it later on. The tiny, tiny little pedagogic choices that have profound impact. That's when you get rid of, things like to multiply by 10, you add a 0. Just don't say that sentence ever, right? Just never say it. There's no need to say it. It doesn't. There are easy substitutions that you can make that still help you make sure the pupils are successful in that particular lesson. Anyway, I digress. That's all.
So just to clarify on that, the isomorphic function on both sides, the equality. I looked it up what an isomorphic function is, but essentially it is morph or change it and modify it in exactly the same way on both the left and right, was my understanding. But if you could just clarify that for all of us as well.
Yeah, sorry, I sometimes speak as though I'm speaking to myself. Yes, isomorphic function. Do the same thing on both sides of the equals sign, basically. But I don't think there's anything wrong with using the language. Apply an isomorphic function to both expressions. I don't think there's anything wrong with using that language. Why would we not? Later on, we want them to understand what functions are. We want them to understand what expressions are. So let's use the language, and whenever we're pointing at an expression, say the word expression. And just like any vocabulary, when we're trying to get a child to learn that this is called a table, well, we point at lots of things called table and we say the word table, right? So why not do that with expression? Why not do that whenever we're using a function? Why not use the word function? But yes, that's what we're talking about there, that we have to apply the same function to both expressions to maintain equivalence. And if we apply the same function and equivalence does hold true, then we can use that symbol. So that's all that means, really. And it's not a big deal to do that when you're teaching early things like 3 plus 4 equals 7. Okay, well, okay, 3 plus 4 does equal 7. It's true. Why? Why does 3 plus 4 equal 7? They're the same. No. Right? 3 plus 4 equals 7, because if I did the same thing to both of those things, equivalence would still be true. So 3 plus 4 plus 5 equals 7 plus 5. Oh, that's interesting. 3 plus 4 plus 2 equals 7 plus 2. 3 plus 4 plus 1 equals 7 plus 1. What does this symbol mean, children? It means if you do the same thing to both sides, to both expressions, then they're still equivalent. It doesn't take huge changes in pedagogic choices to teach with accuracy. So, we can do that at a very early age. And isn't that really powerful? If pupils can do single digit addition, they can do 3 plus 4 equals 7. Then why not go off on, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. Get your counters out, maybe they're in reception or year one. Like, get your counters out, show me 3 plus, show me 3, show me 4, show me 7. What can you say about these? And the pupils will use their language to talk about all sorts of things. And their language will include, I've got the same, right? Maybe they're counters, maybe they're suites, whatever it is. I've got the same here and I've got the same here. Okay, that's interesting. I've got the same, all right, that's fine. Here's another counter and here's another counter and put them on there. Still got the same. And then start doing the same operations, the same functions to both sides. And they can start to realize, well, actually, that's really interesting, they're the same. Then how do we unpick that? Well, we unpick that by using things that are not the same, right? I think you've seen me do sequences at all with algebra tiles. So there's no numberness to it at all. And you use the equal symbol, and there are things on both sides of the equation. They're different, and that freaks pupils out to begin with, because that's the moment where you're teaching them this doesn't mean is the same as, and then you do the same function to both sides, and the symbol stays the same. They go, oh yeah, that's what the symbol means. The symbol doesn't mean these things are the same. The symbol means that I have permission to do the same thing to both sides, and the symbol will hold true. So anyway. It's quite a technical detail bit of conversation.
I love it. It's the nuts and bolts of it, and it comes up so many times, So I talk about the idea that the equality is broke. I use some of Al-Khwarizmi's translated language, repairing inequality, fixing, restoring. The not equal sign. I use the engineers often approximately equal sign when we are rounding, etc. So there's so many things that come from the idea of equality, and I'm sure it comes up for you, Matt, as well. I've seen that with A-level pupils. They just don't understand what the inequality symbol means, because they don't really know what the equality means. You have to go all the way back to those number bonds that Mark's mentioning, and the fact that you can modify you can have the isomorphic function.
So I think for the kids, I mean, you can talk about GCSE as well, the inequalities, especially when they solve quadratic inequalities, their heads get absolutely muddled when you start comparing quadratic inequalities, and then what do you mean you can divide x? No, you can't divide it by x. You have to factorize it, and you have to sketch a graph to find where the inequalities hold. It does baffle their minds, whether in year 10, year 11, or even year 12 or year 13. And then once you get to further maths, gosh, inequalities gets even more interesting when you get to further maths. So definitely. I mean, speaking about A-level, because I thought that's part of what I'm here to talk about, the A-level front. It always comes into my head about the point of statistics. What's the point of statistics as part of A-level maths, or as a standalone qualification, or actually, what's the point of statistics just in the general national curriculum?
Well, I think that someone else on the call should answer that, shouldn't they? That's asking that question of me. Crikey. What do you think the point of it is?
I suppose it's to me. I mean, I'm a person that thinks statistics and maths is definitely. I wouldn't regard statistics as, should it be part of maths? No. I think it should. I think there's definitely a place for statistics as a separate part. I think, there's lots of different countries around the world that do both separate parts. I just taught with my year 10s today about averages from stem and leaf diagrams, and I'm thinking, why are we doing this as part of GCSE maths? It's got nothing really, it's not quite like, teaching algebra, which is like, it's beautiful mathematics, you're doing something beautiful with it. Whereas like statistics, it's like, it's just number crunching or data collecting or analyzing data. And it's like, it is a completely different mindset. I know it's some may argue it's part of mathematics, but then why, it's also involving different subjects, it's you're talking about being part of social sciences instead of being part of mathematics.
Well, one of the things that maths suffers from, is that the right phrase? I don't know. Mathematics is used everywhere, right? And there are mathematical methods used all over the place, but not everything can be in the subject of mathematics. And statistics, probability statistics clearly uses a load of mathematical methods. Fine. Does that make it mathematics? No, that's not the definition of mathematics, that you use mathematical methods. Otherwise, well, crikey, now physics has to be, and so does biology, and so does geography, and so does, so that can't be the definition of it. I think statistics, probability statistics, is a perfectly mature and grown-up subject that can stand alone without mathematics. That thing you're talking about some pure mathematics and having equations that are beautiful. I know a few equations more beautiful than Bayes' theorem, right? So Bayes' theorem is one of the most interesting intellectual pursuits you can possibly have to properly get to grips with Bayesian theories. So there's a huge amount of stuff there that I enjoy doing. I just don't think it belongs in mathematics, as I've said lots of times in the past. It is something that sits outside of mathematics, something that sits inside the social studies, sits inside humanity's desire to ask more existential philosophical questions of itself. Statistics exists because mathematics, which is a truth-making machine, breaks down at the point where it can't have accuracy, where mathematics abhors this the inability to find solutions. So a more powerful domain had to come into existence, because humanity does want to talk about these things. And the answer to that is statistics. Statistics is a more powerful domain because it allows you to speak about things where we don't know truth, where we are really in the realms of philosophy. We're really in the realms of, proper existential crises questions. So that common misconception that some people, mainly propagated by Craig Barton, or maybe something I said on the show, but some people have this idea that I don't like statistics and probability. I adore statistics, absolutely adore it. It just isn't part of maths. It belongs in the social studies. It belongs in the place where humanity is asking itself questions that don't have precise, accurate answers. So, I think that the point of statistics is to allow us to have those bigger conversations as a species.
Yeah.
And, why can't it just stand on its own? I'd love to see every school have statistics as a subject. I've said this lots of times in the past, that, statistics could be there as a subject in its own right. I'd quite like to see that, because it is the debate around, not everything's black and white. We don't know the answer to everything. And if we want to be able to have conversations about things we don't know the answer to, we need some language that allows us to have those conversations. And that's what statistics does. It allows us to have those conversations about the unknown, about the unpredictable, about the unknowable, not just the unknown, but the unknowable. And I think that's really exciting thing to introduce children to. So I'd quite like to see it as its own subject. Just don't ask me to teach it. It's not my bag.
Let's ask Joe Berwick for that, because I know he's doing a workshop on probability distributions and hypothesis testing. The court case scenario.
And this is the thing, right? That people paint this completely false picture of me of hating statistics, but I've got people at my own conference talking about statistics. I can't dislike it that much. Like I said, there's no party line at MathsConf. You can talk about anything you want to talk about, even if it's another subject and not mathematics. So we're opening the floodgates here, because now MathsConf, we're allowing social studies workshops. So that's opened it up to the whole of the social studies now, and MathsConf will just become, what will it become? Conf. It'll just be conf, where we can all meet and just talk about anything in any discipline, which would probably be quite funny. So.
Didn't you tweet, I swear there was a tweet which talks about science conf or complete science or something. Was that of a jokey kind of tweet or something?
It's not a jokey tweet, no.
It's actually real.
Yeah, complete science is a thing, but you're not allowed to see it yet. So.
So it's Work in progress.
hidden away. It's hidden away in the background at the moment. Yeah. So maybe that's what we'll do. Do you remember specialist school status? You're probably too young. Oh, you do remember it, right?
I do, yeah. So I was in secondary school at that point.
Yeah, in specialist schools, you'd say, right, I'm going to be a specialist maths college. But then what you had to do is acquire another subject. So I'm going to be maths and computing. Then you had to acquire another subject. I'm going to be maths, computing, and art. And I think the idea was you just end up acquiring all the subjects so you become a comprehensive school. I think that was the idea. So maybe that's what we'll do with conf. So we'll just add a subject every now and then until it becomes everything conf, comprehensive conf. That's what it could be.
Not comconf, because that would be like computer science.
Yeah, it can't be, and it's just too hard to say comconf. It's and it'd be comconf.com, and that's too much. That's too much. So, anyway, that's what I think about statistics. Can't remember what my answer was, but there we go. That's what
he likes statistics.
I like statistics. I love it. It's brilliant.
Science.
Statistics teachers, they're the best.
Brilliant. Well, we could wrap up there. So yeah, one last plug to the MathsConf, which is on the Saturday the 12th in Gloucester.
CompleteMaths.com, CompleteMaths.com. So if you want to get your ticket, go to CompleteMaths.com. That's where you'll find it. CompleteMaths.com, go into community, book a ticket for the conference next week. All day on the Saturday the 12th, but also quite a decent contingent of people going out on the Friday night as well. So yes, come to the conference, but also come on the Friday for a beer. You're more than welcome, or whatever drink is your preferred. You'll be very welcome. I encourage everyone from primary, from secondary, from FE, from private tuition, everyone to come along. It's a brilliant community. And, if I'm being soppy for a minute, which I don't do very often, if I am being soppy for a minute, it is the thing that I am most proud of in the last 10 years. It's just watching it grow and watching it become what it is fantastic. So I'm very appreciative of everyone that's ever come and everyone that's ever delivered a session. So CompleteMaths.com, come and join us.
I think we're all very, very, very appreciative of the network you've set up. This wouldn't be happening. Maths Chat Live would not be happening if it wasn't for that, or turning up to maths conferences and everything you've done to bring us together. Yeah, so thank you again for your time, and everyone else. I will stop the stream recording. It'll be there on Twitter and YouTube, etc. So you can hear it as many times as you want. Put some more questions, get a conversation going, discuss the equal signs, and so on. All right, I'll hit the